as well as our print, and we have over the counter and various retail installations, single copy sales and newsstands, and we do approximately 2,000 papers a week as a giveaway to our food distribution sites in the community. And that's so that our people who are not on the internet can stay abreast of the county health ordinances, which many of us would only hear pieces of in terms of a press conference. And so we print two full pages every week. We invite you to look at that. We identify the areas by zip code where the infection rate is up in terms of cases of the coronavirus, and we are part of the task force that here in the community working with people. And so we're trying to be engaged. We're supporting some of the volunteers that are working with groups like I'm My Brother's Keeper, Paving Great Futures, 5K Hip Hop. We're now also distributing papers as far north as Hemet and Winchester in terms of food outreaches up there, headed into Oceanside. If you would like to join us this evening, if you have questions, you're concerned about the upcoming election or voting, we want to remind you that in the Voice and Viewpoint, we have been running a voter's guide for the past 3 to 4 weeks with our take in terms of propositions and candidates, but at the same time, encouraging you editorially to vote that which is most important to you because your needs might be different than the ones that we identified in terms of making the decisions on those things that we decided to support. For the city of San Diego, we have identified the measures that we are supporting, such as the establishment of the independent police review board with subpoena powers and district elections for the school board, San Diego Unified. And so we invite you to look at those things. And if you haven't voted yet, we encourage you to start doing so. There are drop locations listed in the paper in terms of where you can take your ballots or drop off. You can always go directly to the Register of Voters out here in Kearney Mesa. They have drive-ups. You can go in to register. If you have a absentee ballot you receive by mail, and based on what's happening with the slowdown in deliveries, you can take that ballot with you to the polls, turn it in, and exchange it for an on-site ballot and vote right there. And so we want us to join the numbers. So far as of this evening, over 72 million people in America have voted already. And yet every vote counts, and we cannot take anything for granted. We see the Supreme Court messing with the vote in Pennsylvania and reserving the right to come back and disqualify. You know, legally, it's always been sufficient if you have an item in the mail and it's postmarked by the date of the mail that's listed there. And we see this every year when people do their income tax filings. If it's postmarked as of the date that's been designated a deadline, there's no penalty. Well, now we have the courts saying that ballots can't be counted after the date, even though they were postmarked and received. And so all of this is what we call voter suppression, active in over 29 states. But praise be to God, we have our people who have decided that they are voting for their lives. And so they are standing in long lines in the rain, delivering pizza and sharing with each other and making sure they vote. If you look at a place like Texas with Harris County, over 3 million people, and the courts there said you can't have a one drop box, which is ridiculous. And yet, I think close to 200,000 people have voted in Texas, and they are saying we're not going to be stopped. And so we encourage you to ask questions, if you will. We certainly will be taking calls at the Voice and Viewpoint on Tuesday if people have questions in terms of issues with the ballots. But we want people not to wait until Tuesday to vote. You got all this weekend, you got the remainder of this week, and you got time to go out there and get your vote in so that if it rains or there's an earthquake or whatever, it won't stop your vote being counted because your life, our very lives depend on this. So with that, we want you to know if you want to call in, you can do so at 858-251-6111, or you can go to godradio1.com. So I'm here with our partner in this communication, Dr. Leonard Thompson, and we are excited about having a chance to spend this little time with you. Dr. Thompson.
Well, Dr. Warren, we are roughly at this time 5 days away and counting from hopefully a change in America, a change that we all know that we need, and a change for the better and for the health of our country. Um, as I began to think about 2020 and all the things that have taken place, um, I just kind of want to reflect on the pivotal role that the Voice and Viewpoint has played in getting out key information to the communities, not only just locally but nationally. People are ordering in the paper just to get the information. As we transition and we're looking at hopefully a transition of leadership, what does the future look like for the Voice and Viewpoint so far as, I won't call it the activist role, but the voice of the people?
Well, I think the future looks very bright because the people are going to need a voice, and we still have people and voices that have not been heard. Our logo speaks to serving San Diego's African and African American communities. And I've shared in the past 3 weeks that we've had polls taken that left out the African and African American communities in terms of undecided voters. And so we're going to still be that voice nationally. As you know, I'm president of Region 5 of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which includes 8 states. And we are in discussions directly with the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta as to what we're going to be able to do in fighting this virus going forward. The CDC is very much aware that it has been derelict in terms of having a greater role in our community. And I think what we've done here with San Diego's Health and Human Services component of San Diego County is a role model that I've shared with other African American publications around the country, that when they get involved, as we have, they're reaching people, they're getting information to folks. And I've had to have this conversation with the Congressional Black Caucus. We also have the support of the California Legislative Black Caucus because with the Congressional Black Caucus, in the past, when they talk of reaching the community, they're talking about churches, but they need to understand that papers are essential services.
Mm-hmm.
And while the churches are closed, we are not. And so the very fact that our partnership drove us online, that we're reaching more people, papers being read around the country in terms of people looking at what we're doing and the suggestions that we're making. And I'm consulting with publishers just about every day in terms of helping them within their local jurisdiction find ways to do some of the partnering that we've done here.
Now I actually want to get to several topics, but before I do that, I also want to talk about some opportunities that are coming up for to be, part of the family at the Voice and Viewpoint. I know that you all are now starting to interview folks that desire to be writers, that are quality writers, that actually want to break into the industry. Now, I want to say this, and because it's so important for you guys to understand, or for the community to understand, it's not easy to work for a radio station. It's not easy to get onto the staff of a reputable newspaper. It's not easy for you to get involved in certain key industries because most of those industries are flooded and already taken up. So when you had mentioned that you were opening up some doors and giving some young people and some up and coming writers an opportunity, it was very exciting to me because the power of the press. I know myself when I got a press badge, you couldn't tell me. It was like it was like having a police officer badge. I was like, press,
Yeah.
and it got you into certain places to do your work. So let's talk about that real quick.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because over the years we've had different internships and scholarship programs, and the one of the outstanding people that came through our paper years ago was a young man by named Jay Jackson, who came to us from City College, did an internship with us, went to Channel 10, and ended up being an anchor in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
And you often see him doing cameos on such programs as Scandal when they were on,
Mm-hmm.
and he went on to do a number of things. So the writing part, what we do at the Voice and Viewpoint, is if you're interested in writing and being a journalist, we're not looking for people who want to do poetry and write fiction and all those things. But if you read and you're interested, it's an education in itself because a newspaper covers every subject matter. And when I have people in intern positions, I make sure it's a learning opportunity. I give them assignments that they can learn, but I do discussion and orientation before they do the assignments, let them raise questions as they do it, hire people as independent journalists to do investigative pieces. And one of the things that's happened in this country in the past 24 months is that as a result of social media and intrusion by foreign governments, you will see that papers like the New York Times, Washington Post, there's been a surge in hiring investigative journalists
Mm-hmm.
and people who are going to ask questions and not just put stuff on the internet. So we have an opportunity. And consistent with that, recently, we just made a donation to the San Diego County Association of Black Journalists Scholarship Fund. The paper did to encourage young people who might want to be writers. And that's kind of a new thing because historically it's been the major newspapers that supported them, but not our papers. And so I'm glad we've been able to financially step up, make a contribution, and be supportive. And I must say that we don't discriminate in terms of people that are hired.
Mm-hmm.
I always say you can be from Mars as long as you're interested in writing and you have a willingness to learn. We can work with you.
I want to say this because this is the mistake that a lot of people make, and they think that just because they write for the Voice and Viewpoint that is locally based in San Diego, that their story will only hit the local market. Let's talk about
Oh
all
no.
the other places it could go, especially if it's a great story.
Well, I can tell you every week our paper, even before we went online, we're on the White House press list. Our paper goes to members of the Congressional Black Caucus. Our paper goes to the state legislature. In terms of those people, it goes to people who are corporate VPs and decision makers around the country, because many people have an interest in what we do as a people and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so they make decisions in terms of charitable giving and involvement based on what we do, number one. There's also a very important governmental link because under Title V of the U.S. Code, there's an element called the Administrative Procedures Act that requires if you have federal dollars, you're supposed to give notice, which is due process.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a government recipient and you've got a contract and you run notice in the Voice and Viewpoint, either during the bid time that you're trying to let the contract or when you're looking to hire subs, if you end up not getting one person of color and a challenge is raised down the road, the very fact that you ran your notice with us says that you met the good faith requirements under the national labor, the labor entity that monitors those things. And so there are good business reasons for people to do business with us.
Mm-hmm.
And they get advantages, and then our people learn in the course of doing that.
Now, I'm not bragging, but I also know that a lot of your stories get picked up and other newspapers run it as stories in their paper because it's so well written and it's so informative.
And we have had that happen for many years. A matter of fact, and one thing I'll say about the LA Times, whenever they picked up a story from us, they always gave the courtesy notice of where the story came from. The UT subscribes to our paper in terms of people who work there. But if they get an idea for a story, they're not kind enough to say it originated with us. And so we are on wire services. We have our own wire service within the National Newspaper Publishers Association. We are part of the Associated Press wire service. We do international news. That's why we're able to run the stories each week in terms of African countries, because we have writers in other countries who are contributing to what we do. And so it is an educational effort. And I want to say that the Latanya West, as our managing editor, has made a phenomenal difference in terms of the substance and the work that she puts into it. We have a real strong team that's been assembled. She's organized. She works well with people. She brings a wealth of information and experience, having come out of Berkeley, having worked for major entities like NBC, and having been bilingual in terms of Greek and spending
Hmm.
times overseas. And so all of those experiences come together when you do a newspaper.
Well, I'm just gonna say like this for Miss West. She reminds me of Susan the Past. When Barry Gordy would holler and scream and everything like that, she would say, "Now, Barry, Mister Gordy, instead of giving me a fast no, just give me a
Yeah,
slow
so yes,
yes."
yeah.
And so I love the fact that she understands how to be a team player, but also she gets that slow yes and move the needle further.
Yeah, she does. She definitely tames me in terms of the slow yes,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons that I'm always so anxious to listen to her is because her heart is really in what she does. She's a perfectionist, and when I watch how she operates, so much of that is a reflection of her mother,
Hmm.
who is that kind of detailed person and a writer in her own right and recognized for her abilities,
Hmm.
and so. It's quite a compliment. So I've been surrounded because at the same time I have Tanya here. She stepped into the gap when Chida stepped away, and yet Chida is doing very well in terms of the industry with her own efforts. And we communicate, and she contributes things to the paper from time to time. So we have a team effort, and this is the year that we're looking to really leapfrog in the
Hmm.
direction of some things that we're talking about. You know, we're doing our apps and
Hmm.
our drones, and we're just going to be expanding social media
Hmm.
coverage in ways that we haven't done before.
And I also want to just encourage people that if you are interested in writing for the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint, reach out to the managing editor, Miss Latanya West. The number they can call.
619-266-2233, or you can go online to Latanya, Latanya, at sdvoice.info. You'll probably also find ads on Indeed for
Mhm.
positions with the Voice and Viewpoint. And we're always looking to expand. And we're excited. We see this as a growth time.
Mhm.
Right now, we are preparing, as you know, with Latanya's help and leadership and yours, we're preparing to do a virtual gala,
Mhm.
which is just going to be off the hook. And we're preparing to do something special in terms of our annual Martin Luther King issue, which is going to be a step different from the past. And
Mhm.
as you know, this year, the Y is having a virtual MLK activity.
Mhm.
So we're moving into those areas, and
Well,
we're excited.
I got one more caveat. Understanding that when you get involved with the press, the key word is confidentiality. You're going to have to be a person that is not prone to gossip because, again, it is about being confidential as you are writing. And then for the community, you've given even the layman writers that if there's something that comes up and they want to write an editorial, you even said, "Hey, write a letter. You can write it to the editor. You can get it, and you could be published, especially if it's your point of view. It doesn't always have to agree with everybody, but
No,
it's the fact that the voice and viewpoint allows your voice to be heard."
and we need to write even more than before. One of the things I've noticed, if you've watched CNN or MSNBC, as they try to move people toward voting, they've been doing a lot of reaching back in the archives,
Hmm.
showing what happened in 1965 and how black folks lined up to vote
Hmm.
after all of the oppression and rejection that we went through. And it's good to know what's happened before. And all I ask is, when people have ideas and they want to know, well, will you print something? And I always say, no, you have to submit it first, and then we read it and we look at it, and if it works, then we do it. And of all the awards that the Voice and Viewpoint has received, I believe we have received close to 500 awards in the past 30 years in all kinds of areas of journalism. I've received many in terms of editorials that have been written over the years, and I share with people. I'm a mutation because I've never had a course in journalism, but I know what it takes to do a paper. And if you have a desire to learn, then I have a desire to help you and to share with you.
Well, if you could write briefs and all the things you have to do as a lawyer, I'd imagine you're going to be able to do the paper. So, with that being said, opportunities after opportunities after opportunities, even in the midst of the COVID, I'm encouraging young people that are desiring to be journalists, college age students, or even that person out there that may always wanted to be a reporter but thought it was too late in your life. Here is an opportunity for you to, quote unquote, I'm gonna call it an audition. You know what I'm saying? Because, like, say for instance, me, I'm a good writer, but my dyslexia at times will have me drop S's and EDs and everything else. That's why I have good people around me say,
Yeah.
okay, you done drop these
Okay.
and review it. But if you have a desire to be in media, here is another opportunity for you to be that. And these opportunities don't come around often. So please look
Let me
at
put
it,
this
take
foot. Let
advantage.
me put this footnote to what you're saying, Dr. Thompson,
Mhm.
because in this COVID environment, we have to be very careful in terms of getting out and moving around. And yet, stories are still unfolding out there. There are individual stories. There are family stories. There are interviews to be done in terms of people who have experienced this virus or who've had a loss,
Mhm.
or what's happened in terms of jobs or businesses. And so, one of the things we did very early, we went after the black businesses in our community, the restaurants, the carryouts. We started profiling them and encouraging
Mhm.
people to do business since so many people were doing Uber and Grubs, calling in, making orders in terms of what, and it's turned out very well for a number of our restaurants in the community are doing better now than they were doing before, and they don't have to maintain the hours level that they have. I know Bankhead, Mississippi is an example where they're open now from Tuesday through Sunday from 12 to 6. Bowlegged Barbecue keeps hours that start like Thursday, latter part of the week going forward. So people have adjusted their schedules in a smart way to coincide with what we're doing.
Mhm.
We're just encouraging folks to be safe. If you see, you got a phone there and you got great megapixels on the phone, you can
Mhm.
take a picture. You see something that's a story. You
Mhm.
can take that picture and send that and write a paragraph. We'll go over it with you and tell you whether or not it's something good.
Mhm.
But don't expect that because you submit something that the next thing I'm going to do is send you a check.
Mhm.
Because what we do is we learn as we go
Mhm.
in terms of the business. And so these are opportunities for exposure.
Yeah.
And I hope this has been helpful. But thank you for bringing all this up.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it because I look at the opportunities that we had as young people, especially coming out of progressive churches and progressive movements back in the day when we had so much strength in our our civil rights organizations, and so our young people had so much um, opportunities to experience and to sit. And the fun thing I think for us when we were young is that it wasn't always about the money, it was about the experience. And if we were good at it, the money came. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
that's a very important point because over the years, many times we had young people in our community that wanted to write, but economics was such that they had to get some compensation for it. And at times we've had uh, entities, at least when we had the West Coast Black Publishers, we had
Hmm.
businesses that gave us scholarships. Sometimes we had scholarship money and we didn't have anybody to give it to
Hmm.
because they wanted people to have at least 12 hours in terms of course load for what they were doing.
Hmm.
And so let's not limit yourself. Step out boldly
Hmm.
and see what comes to support what you want to do. And you
Yeah.
can have more than one career. You know, I often share with people, I've had 12 careers
Hmm.
and I've been excited about all of them.
Hmm.
And so don't limit yourself. Be ready to go and take a chance and get involved. And if we can help and you bring a sincere heart, we'll be happy to see what we can do.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that I loved about it when I was growing up is that I wasn't getting paid, but I got to go everywhere.
Yeah.
I got to see more states and I got to travel. And my mentor was so amazing because we would eat at some of the best restaurants.
Yep.
And when the bill came, he just pulled it onto himself and said, "I got it."
There you
So,
go.
but you learned so much just by, like I said, my mentor. I said, if my uncle said, if you can carry a person's briefcase and be in the room, and just if you sit and listen, you will learn more than you can ever imagine. And I did that for many years. And here was the crazy thing: one day, we were going to an event. He had to preach. He was a major pastor, and I'm carrying his briefcase. And I sat down and sat his Bible and everything and sat behind him. He leaned back and said, "Son, you got the mantle today. I'm gonna introduce you." And I looked at him like, "Hold on, wait a minute.
Yeah,
This is a big thing."
you had to be ready
And
to speak.
he said, "You ready? Go on and do it." And so many times when you least expect it, the
You are
blessing
being
comes.
you're being prepared, and that's so important because I first went to work on Capitol Hill when I was 17, and so I was in the room with Adam Powell, Shirley Chisholm, and Gus Hawkins, and I learned just by being in the room.
Hmm.
The late Ron Brown, who was Secretary of Commerce, I knew Ron, and Ron got his start by carrying Vernon Jordan's briefcase when
Hmm.
Vernon was president, national president, NAACP. And so there's so many people.
Hmm.
If you go back and look at the history of folks in terms of who was in the room
Hmm.
and who ended up, doing things, it was because they had that opportunity and the exposure.
Yeah.
And so
And
we're encouraging people that yeah, there's still time and room for those things.
so I'm going to say this just so that we are very, very clear with everybody. We are not saying that these are not going to be paid positions. We are saying that there are paid positions. We just need to make sure that your skill set is worthy of the pay.
Well, you know what? And I'm glad you said that because we have entities like Google, and there are a number of them that are giving grants to papers for paid positions to help them in terms of having the staff to cover
Hmm.
the things that are taking place.
Hmm.
And so there are a number of entities out there that are working in this direction. And nothing is more embarrassing than making an application and getting a grant awarded, and then you don't have anybody to give it to.
Exactly.
And so we need to expand our minds and decide that if you have a desire to serve, an opportunity for service will bring with
Hmm.
it a reward for you. I always like Luke 6:38 in the New Testament, which says, "Give and it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will he cause men
Men,
men to give unto your
he didn't say
bosom."
saints.
And he didn't say lottery. He said men, that people will bless you
Hmm.
by putting yourself in a position. And I
Hmm.
see that with the volunteers that are working on the line, putting the food baskets together every week. And I just make this footnote that this year with the gala, we are going to devote the gala to honoring and recognizing people who have been in the trenches all this time as volunteers, doing the kind of things that have
Hmm.
made the difference in terms of our family and the quality of life for people. So we're excited.
So in the mindset, in the energy of mentorship and also volunteerism, I want to go to the election. It's 5 days away, and there's so many people that are volunteering. They're
Yes.
pushing out the polls. The numbers are higher than ever before,
Yes.
but yet we still got some issues going on with folks trying to mess up the balloting. So let's talk about that. 5 days away.
Okay. Well, I think that, again, going back to the scriptures, it was Gamaliel who was the wise man that was the teacher of Saul when he was Saul and then Paul.
Mhm.
And Gamaliel, yeah, said that there, if an idea be of man, the time will come that it will flicker and fade away. He says, but if the idea will be of God, there's nothing that man can do to stop it.
Mhm.
And I think what we're seeing right now is an idea which is of God in terms of people understanding that, as Biden says, the very soul of America is at stake. Our very heart is at stake. And it's no longer about red or blue. It's about life and death.
Mhm.
And I hear people saying who are standing online that they're standing there because their very lives depend. And
Mhm.
they're right in terms of the death rate and the infections. And I saw a statistic this evening that said on the whole continent of Africa, with all the countries that are on that continent, they have only had 41,000 deaths since this virus started. And yet we have 225,000 because we won't stop and discipline ourselves in terms of what we need to do.
Well, Dr. Warren, just wait one second here. I'm trying to make America great again and see the reason why we just keep better numbers. We just keep better numbers. In Africa, they don't keep the same
Yeah,
numbers.
right.
And folks, they just bear them on the side of the road. And that's the
Yeah,
reason
yeah,
why
yeah,
they just report these little things.
yeah.
We America the great. We good.
Well, I mean, this is the week that the White House surrendered to the virus and in effect said, hey, it is what it is. And you're on your own if you live, congratulations. And if you don't, then that's not our fault. So we got major issues here. We still have people who don't believe that the virus is real in spite of all of the scientific facts. And I'm going to tell you what I see. When I look at the people standing behind the president at these rallies, the ones who take the masks off, and maybe because I'm a black man in America and what we've experienced, I'm seeing things a little differently. But what I see is an element of this country that has decided that if we're going to make America great again, we got to keep America white. And even though there's some black people that are involved in this thing, they're not black people who are arming themselves as militia. They're not black people who are coming out trying to intimidate people voting. They're not black people setting fire to ballot boxes or taking ballots out of people's mailboxes and throwing them in the trash. They're not black people doing those things. And so I see a country that realizes in many respects they see Donald Trump as the great white hope. And he's put 3 judges on the Supreme Court, and he has stacked, with the help of McConnell, over 200 judges in positions around the country. And all they see is the numbers going up in terms of immigration. And I'm glad we're reminding people that he did a Muslim ban, that he called all the Mexicans racist, that he said that
Yeah,
that we were all from S countries, and the total disregard for people. But it's not about Trump at this time. It's about saving America. Because if we can save America in terms of democracy and the beacon we represent to the world, then we can recover our friends and our relationships that we've lost.
So I'm going to ask you this question. What role do you think the church plays into bringing America back together again?
Well, I think the church could play a role, but I think there's a lot of misrepresentation. I've been watching the evangelical community very closely and how they have tried to code their words in terms of wanting people to vote for the president. They've coded it in, well, we have to be concerned about abortion and we have to be concerned about life. Well, yes, but if we're concerned about life, then we're concerned about the hungry. We're concerned about people with pre-existing conditions that are going to lose health care. If this Supreme Court overrules and throws out the Affordable Care Act. And so, yeah, we got to be concerned about life in more than one way. And so I still see that element giving the faith a bad reputation, because everybody who is not white and a conservative is not bad. There are conservative black people who are liberal, but they're still conservative in terms of their concern about life and the quality of life. And so we don't make it a race thing, and they have reduced it to one. And I think they're going to be in some real difficulty.
Yeah, and one of the things I think that, as we look at the vote and as we get 5 days away, I think that, from a spiritual perspective, the country needs to be on their knees praying too, and really seeking God's perfect will during this time, because there's an energy that's being kind of stoked, that if it doesn't go the way our current president wants, that he's saying stand up, because he told them to stand down and wait.
He said, stand back and
And
stand by.
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
And that's important as opposed to stand down.
Yeah.
Because stand down means stop, but stand by means this is just a pause.
Yeah.
And so they are taking all of this stuff literally that he's saying in terms of calling people to do this kind of thing. But I think that the president and his administration We have reached the point this week where we've had 500,000 new COVID cases in a week in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just almost over 70,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
And in the midst of that, the vice president has 5 people in his inner circle test positive,
Mm-hmm.
and he's still out there. And everywhere the president has been, the numbers have gone up as they've tracked after he's been there with these rallies, even though they might have been outside and at the airport. And so he's not presenting a plan to try and save lives. And he's not even pushing the wearing of masks.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to just we have to be diligent ourselves. I'm especially concerned that African Americans not get so relaxed that we start moving around without masks. Yes, the holidays coming, but let's live beyond the holidays. Let's not just get carried away and we gotta have people over for dinner, and the next thing you know, 6 weeks from now, everybody's in ICU and there's no ventilator for them.
Well, my house is one of those spots where people come to break bread on Thanksgiving, and we gonna have a big shindig at my house on Thanksgiving. We're gonna have drive-by pickups of dinners, and we're gonna wave with them, and we'll be socially distanced as they drive by, and we're gonna make sure we put the cranberry sauce to go in little containers.
There you go.
But we are gonna be very, very safe this year. What I say to people is that in our household, there are very few people that we are around all the time that are a part of our daily life. And you have to just be very careful when you begin, even if they're your family and you love them. This is a virus that is so unpredictable. And I want to say this, one of my colleagues just recently is the only person in her house that got COVID. And she's recuperating. The one thing she says is that the headache is so bad and she can't get rid of the headache. And we're seeing that everybody that we've talked to, there's something going on in the brain
Yeah.
with this virus too.
Yeah, and it attacks the lingering effects that nobody recovers 100%. There are residual issues that are involved with people. And it's so important, and this is one reason why I made sure that our church didn't stayed online, because we have older members and we have people who have children and grandchildren who are moving around, and the loved ones that come to the house, that can be the person or the friends, like the movie star The Rock. He kept his family quarantined, and they had some close friends over, and the whole family ended up being contaminated and testing positive.
Just with a friend visit.
Yeah, just with a friend visit.
Yeah.
And so, that's why you see some people, they show the kids coming up and the grandparents waving to them through the window and not bring them in, and they miss hugging. People want to hug, but the hug can be fatal.
Yeah.
And so we got to be very mindful, and I want us to be mindful and not get carried away with the holidays. Speaking of holidays, Dr. Thompson, I have a special piece in the paper this week. It's called Some Things You Should Know About Halloween. And I talk about the history of Halloween, which is important, but I also share how it's a $9 billion industry and how much money people are going to be spending this year on Halloween in spite of COVID. And some people are going to be dressing and going out and doing those kind of things. We cannot afford that luxury. We need to, like you say, this virus is deadly, is non-discriminating, and you won't know. It doesn't ring a bell when it attaches itself to you.
And here's the thing. So all the parents that said, well, my baby need to do trick-or-treating because they go to the store and buy 4-5 bags of candy, stash it around the house, and let them go from room to room
Look for the candy.
and look for the candy. It's okay. It's just candy. And I want you to understand that it will be okay. It will be okay.
And they don't need to dress up necessarily for it either. I mean, because first of all, those of us who are believers don't believe in the whole costume thing in the first place. And some of our churches would have All Saints evening for the kids to dress like saints, but nobody should be going out this year doing that. You can't be going door to door. Some people will be in some neighborhoods that say if a person is in a gated community and they know, but you don't know what the exposure is because you don't have contact tracing every time you have the communication with someone.
Can I give a knock knock zoom zoom?
Yeah.
A knock knock zoom zoom goes something like that. It's trick or treat.
Yeah.
This year there might be some more tricks than
Yeah.
the treat, and the
Yes.
trick could be that you could be a carrier of this COVID, and everybody can be attacked and experience it. So I just want to encourage everybody that COVID is still very real. We have to be very mindful of how we go about it. Encouraging you to use your mask, wear your mask, wash your mask, and making sure that you're listening to your physicians. There's so much research out there that tell you how to keep healthy. They talked about increasing your vitamin D and
Yes.
zinc and other things just so that you can make it through this season. Now I want to ask this question, Dr. Warren, the flu shot.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, I'm nervous. You know,
I
it's
think you
out
should
there.
get the flu shot.
Okay.
I know my wife and I, we got our flu shots about a month ago.
Hmm.
And even though the flu mutates and stuff, scientifically it's suggested that your chances of survival are stronger because the flu shot will help you against the flu. The worst thing you can do is have the flu and then get the exposure to the virus. And as we get older, with all of most of us have pre-existing conditions. We either high blood pressure or type 2 diabetes or obese. We got some issue going with us, or we're stressed, and I'm sure we're even more stressed now in terms of not having the monies that we need. You know, we're living under a moratorium on evictions, and people don't have food. They got bills that got to be paid, and just all kinds of things. We just got a statistic that said at least during this period, 40% of the children in this country are food challenged, and people are not eating, and we're trying to help folks. So all of that kind of stress can pull your immune system down, and we want people to be as careful as possible.
Yeah, and that's really important. And so there's so much information out there, and it's time for us to take the opportunity to read, as well as share and have the open dialogue of how we can do it better. Make sure that you're checking in on your neighbors, especially your older neighbors, and ask the question, how can I help? How can I help you?
That's important to ask that. And speaking of those, remember, I want to remind you that if you have a question for us in our time remaining or a comment, then you can reach us online at 858-251-6111, 858-251-6111, or you can dial in your question at godradio1.com. We're following us. We're streaming on Facebook and Periscope and those things. So, yeah, we're just excited about the fact that we can communicate because it can be difficult being shut up
Hmm.
and being shut away. We want to encourage you. We don't want you to get depressed or despondent or hopeless, and stay strong.
Well, one of the things that I'm encouraging everybody to do is spend some time with their finances. You
Yes.
know, this is believe it or not, this is a season that we have so much time that the stuff that we couldn't get to, now it's time to get to. If you got back paperwork, back taxes, now's the time to get them filed in and focus on how can we better ourselves in coming out of the COVID. You
And
know,
you want to reassess. This is a time to reassess your lifestyle and your needs.
Mhm.
I think that we will not go back to the way we were ever again. There's going to be differences both in terms of where people work, number of people working from home, people who are going to be Zooming in terms of meetings. Travel is not going to be what it was. That's why we see Boeing just announced that in the next, between now and sometime in 2021, they're going to lay off over 130,000 people because they're not building planes because people not going to be getting on planes. They're not going to be traveling that way. And the hotels are going to be up for sale, and many of them are going to be purchased like here to become housing for the homeless. Because the whole idea of conventions, Vegas has made changes in terms of which days they're open now.
Mhm.
Maybe Thursday, Friday, the weekend, but people are not coming back in terms of those numbers because what we used to see of people gathering, we're not going to want to gather like that again. We're all going to be cautious and concerned in terms of what we're dealing with.
Mhm.
Your clothing is going to change. 80% of the manufacturers of clothing have lost monies. And I want to I put in a plug for Old Navy because about a month or so ago, a month and a half, Old Navy announced that on election day, it's going to pay all of its employees and all of its stores to go out and man the polls in terms of the election process. And I think that's a commendable
Mhm.
step since we won't have as many older people being at risk to man the polls as we've had before.
Yeah, and you know, it's a unique time because you know we saw like Rubio's filed for Chapter 11. We see a lot of things.
Sizzlers filed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sizzler's filed. You know, we had a big tear jerking session when we found out that Soup Plantation is not
Yep.
coming back.
Gone.
You know, so many businesses are closing for good. Can we rebound after this pandemic?
Well, not if we have the current leadership that we have, because we see now that when we had the first CARES package, it did a lot to stabilize the economy, and we're still seeing some benefit. It's projected if we don't do something soon, over 100,000 small businesses are going to shut permanently
Hmm.
going forward. And so this is a very serious issue. That's why it's going to be different than things have been. And what we need to do is look at where we are, look at what looks like it's going to be different, reassess opportunities that we might see because every change brings new markets and new
Hmm.
job opportunities. What you have to do is look at it and see how can you fit in as opposed to I got to go and see who's hiring. Yeah, it might be a time for you to go into business yourself.
Hmm.
Um,
So,
who knows?
so let me ask you this question in our last few minutes that we have. The school systems are opening up all over America. uh, Vista School System in California opened up, I guess, 2 weeks or a week ago, and they've already had two cases and already had to start sending people home and quarantining them. San Diego Unified School District has started phase one, you know, and they're saying that at the beginning of the year, it will be going into phase two where they will have the elementary school kids coming 4 days a week
Yeah,
and
Monday through
5 days. Yeah,
Thursday. Yeah.
in the middle school and high schools, I think it's 2 days, and then they'll have them fully engaged by the end of January. Uh, I see parents protesting, saying that we need to open up the schools. The school districts need to do more. My question is, are we just creating a ticking time bomb that's going to explode?
Well, some of those parents are taking that position because the school's made up for the daycare that they couldn't afford to have, and they have to stay home and educate. We already know that over 800,000 women that were in the workforce have dropped out as a result of this period
Mhm.
since March because of their parental duties and the things at home, and they're losing gains that they made in terms of seniority and employment. So that's a major issue. And so I don't think that, most of the school districts around the country are taking the position that they're leaving it up to the parents because it's not just a question of parents coming back. You have a number of teachers who are older and who are at risk, and they've made it clear they're not returning because the exposure could be fatal for them.
Mhm.
And the system can't make people make those kind of life and death decisions. And so we still are putting too much emphasis on the economic aspect. And I believe that if we're successful with changing the occupancy of the White House and and the leadership of the Senate, that we'll be able to get the kind of support for PPE and food and all of the different things that we need, the tracing, the contact tracing, and all of the things that will allow us to do as a nation what New York did in the early days of the virus, where we can bring the numbers down and bring them under control. And I think when people are looking at the leadership showing what can be done, that it'll be an incentive because there's still people in America who are divided and that believe this president so that they're putting their lives at risk.
So, I think my major concern, number one, is if we move too quickly, especially in the school system, with the population of teachers right now, that we will lose a great amount of our teachers, and we'll have to close down anyway.
We will have to close down anyway. We will lose teachers. What we haven't done in this process, and this is an issue across the country. Remember, there are many places where they don't have broadband, they don't have internet, And I know in one particular situation, I forget which state it was, that even though the school had to close, or the libraries had to close down, the libraries left their Wi-Fi on so that parents could drive up on the parking lot and use the Wi-Fi for the kids in terms of doing. We should be looking at putting a laptop or a pad for our kids in every household. Some schools are doing it, many have not, and we should be. We're going to have to get Wi-Fi. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I understand countries like France had this stuff done years ago
Mm-hmm.
as an automatic part of what's taking place.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the capacity, but we've held off in terms of doing what we need to do.
Let me ask you a question. What if they made it where Wi-Fi had to be available to everybody between this time and that time, like school hours, and then they can shut it off after school hours and charge if you wanted to stay on.
Well, they shouldn't have to shut it off at all. And you know, some situations they can use hotspot in terms of their cell phones. But we need to, you know, there are two things we need to deal with. We need to make Wi-Fi or broadband access available to every household. Number one, and we need to deal with the healthcare issue on a national basis, like many countries have already done. And I think that COVID-19 is going to force us in that direction because even though we're close to 9 million, and while we've lost 225,000, we still have at least 7 million people out there either recovering. The death rate has gone down. In the early stages, 25% of the people infected were dying. Now the numbers have dropped to 8%, so they're making some progress, but no number should be acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable that we got 50 or 100 people dying every day
Mm-hmm.
from this. And so the leadership, again, folks, getting out the vote, making your vote count. We want the vote to count so that we are no longer looking at uh, the electoral college versus the popular vote. Biden needs 270 electoral votes. Now, California and the West Coast, you know, we blue. You can see it if you look at the maps. But we need to be in touch with our friends and family and loved ones in those red states, and we need to be pushing them to get to the polls and to vote so that we get the numbers. The one thing that's going to make the difference is that if we have, when they start counting next Tuesday night and they release the numbers, if the number of votes that have been cast in the states with electoral college numbers exceeds 270, let's say it goes to 300 or 350, then that's going to make it no way that Trump's plans to undermine it can work. And so we want it to be so overwhelming that we want the electoral college to be as significant as the popular vote. Because remember last time he lost the popular vote, but he
Yeah,
got the electoral college.
exactly.
And so this time, I must say that Biden and Harris are going after all those votes.
Mm-hmm.
We should get Pennsylvania. We should get Georgia. Okay, we should get Florida. You know, that northern corner of Florida near Georgia is white and conservative, but when you get down to Broward County, you know, the blacks down there, 95% of the African Americans in Broward County are voting, and maybe it's higher this time.
Mm-hmm.
So far, this is so important, people. So far, over 72 million people have voted. And we're a country with over 300 million folks. So we're
Mm-hmm.
close to a third of the people,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still standing in line in rain and everything to vote because they understand. They're voting, they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, they're voting.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers show that there's more Democrats voting than Republicans. So that's why they're looking at putting an armed militia out there and trying to intimidate people.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think there's any way that we'll get Texas?
I do believe that we're going to get Texas. I do think that Texas is going to turn. Remember what happened. Harris County is the biggest county in the country. Over 3 million people live in Harris County, and the courts in Texas limited the county to one drop box.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that the people who have voted so far in Harris County exceeds over 200,000 people that have already, and they're waiting in line.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they're going to turn it. I think they're going to turn it because even Republicans in there, remember the Bushes live in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
We anticipate the Bushes are going to vote for Biden. There's no way they're going to be voting for Trump. with the insanity. And the party's got to be restructured. Now, you got Republicans that are going to vote for Biden, but they don't want people to know they're going to vote for Biden. We call that the Bradley effect. What happened to Tom Bradley when everybody said they were voting for him, and then when the vote went in, he lost because nobody wanted people to know that they really weren't voting for him. Okay, and I think that the COVID has been such a driving factor that people now are going to go beyond color to survival. It's no longer red or blue. It's like Biden reminds them, there's an empty seat at too many tables
Yeah.
in America.
And that's the one thing that we have to be very cognizant about is that in this season we all are making significant decisions and choices in our life. When we came in today, we talked about downsizing and
Yes.
moving from cable TV to internet TV.
Yes.
You have to really begin to look at what you really need
That's right.
and what's this a luxury? Because now, cable was great, but the internet, you get even more stuff.
And cable is no longer necessary.
Exactly.
And you look at, and people are turning those cable boxes in every day. Okay, and there are alternatives from Fire Sticks to Wi-Fi. All kinds of options are out there.
Yeah.
And so we need to look at spending our money more wisely in terms of what we do.
Yeah, and definitely adjust your spending habits and realizing that there is, many opportunities for us to save during this season and to also to flourish. I know a lot of friends that credit scores are better than they've ever been in life.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
People's credit scores are going up. People are not. Some people are living on their credit cards because that's what they have to do. But I've noticed as I talk to believers, to God's people, God's people are benefiting and prospering. Lord is, and He will take the worst situation you have and turn it into a prosperous one because that's what He does. And so we just need to be mindful of looking at opportunities to help other people, those of us who are being blessed, that we bless others.
Amen. With that being said, Dr. Warren, final words before we sign off for the night.
Well, I think it was a God-sent discussion. We didn't need to beat you over the head about the votes, and many of you have already voted. This is a time for prayer and intercession. I like 2 Chronicles 7:14 as a scripture to leave with you, and you can look it up. And it says, if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways and pray, then will He open the windows and they'll hear from heaven. And so we need to become a people of prayer. During this time, we need to pray for the nation, pray for the change. We need to pray that to stop this virus. We need to pray for the breakthrough. And we need to be reminded that Ephesians 6:12 is in effect because it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And we certainly see spiritual wickedness in the high place of a White House and both president, vice president, the people around them, and their disregard for life. And so prayer has always been a key. If you go back and look at the history of this country, it was built on prayer. It's no accident that we say in God we trust. And a lot of us have gotten away from prayer, and sometimes God will give you a circumstance and a situation that gives you an opportunity to get back in line. And I think that this is such a time, and my prayers are going to be with each and every one, that your eyes be open, that your spirit be encouraged, and that you make that connection so that He can come through and be your rescue and redeemer.
Amen. Well, until next week, we say Godspeed, and we just want you to continue to go out and vote and to support your community right here from GODradio1.com.
Thank the Lord.